to Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Any notifications? I haven't gotten one yet.
Sure.
All right, just got a Facebook notifications. That's on.
I got a LinkedIn notification.
LinkedIn's on. Anybody for Twitter?
Okay, well, we'll just have to go without Frank. Let's go, Tim.
Okay, so Frank.
Start the stream, please.
Oh, there's Frank.
Franco Maldini, Radice.
Okay,
Live on
can
Twitter.
you give me the,
You want to just check on Frank's?
no, I don't.
Okay.
Why not?
Just did it.
Okay.
Mm.
All right. We're places. We're ready to go. The millionth show of the Gillmor gang. Okay, and mute is off, and we're gonna go in 3, 2, 1, and
Hi, Steve Gillmor here. This is the Gillmor gang. I'd like to
Friday.
welcome from the state of the framework of Massachusetts,
Oh.
Mr. Dennis Pombriant. Welcome,
That would
Dennis.
be me. Hello. The land of the Boston baked bean and codfish.
Yeah, unfortunately, the Celtics looked pretty good yesterday.
I didn't see, I guess. Yeah. Codfish and Boston baked bean pizza is a little known delicacy.
And it needs to stay little known.
Did they play? I thought they didn't play yesterday. I thought it was the day before.
It was the
Oh,
day
it could have
before.
been, but that's, that's why they call it the Gillmor gang. So the guy in my lower left is in the Atlanta, Georgia area, the state which got it right in the last election. And his name is Brent Leary.
Thank you for the very nice introduction. Thank you.
Okay.
So Brent, is pulled pork pizza your favorite?
No, I don't need pulled pork on my pizza. Pepperonis will do. You know,
Nice.
cheese and pepperoni. That's nice.
What about baked beans?
Oh,
I have
I don't
visions of little
really-
pepperonis running
Man,
around.
how about some pineapple?
There you go.
How about we move this along?
Excellent. So in order of appearance, the British guy in the middle is Keith Tier. Welcome, Keith.
Yeah, you should try chips on pizza.
Mm.
Not a good thing. Fish and chips don't belong on pizza.
Fish and chips on a pizza.
oh no.
How about Scotch egg on pizza?
The big carb load.
Anchovies, for goodness sake.
So
Anchovies are awesome.
Keith, can you give me a minuscule lower third comment, please?
Life is fun in the fast lane of Palo Alto.
That
Okay.
sounds like an Eagles song.
Keith has an interesting
Na-na-na-na-na.
camera angle today.
I'm using my iPhone. I'm using the new Apple thing where
Oh,
you
you're doing it. Okay.
So this is my iPhone up above my screen. And it kind of, if I move, it'll move with me, I think.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah.
There you go.
So I'm testing it out. I've got the developer versions of iOS 16 and Mac. What's it called? Begins with M.
M2?
Oh, M2. You talking about
No. The
No,
name
no.
of the OS, the new OS. It's
Mac
called,
OS?
Yeah,
It's called, what's it called? Ventura. Not
Yeah,
being with
that
M.
started with an M.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's an yeah. Jesse the
Ace
Body
Ventura, Bet Detective.
So
Okay.
this is my first test of using it.
Okay,
And by
and
the
while
way-
you're doing that, let's no by the ways. Thank you. So Frank Radis is in London, I believe. Welcome, Frank.
I am. Thank you. Hello, Steve. Hello, gang. And so Dennis, my brother, speaking of the Celtics, played basketball at Boston College when Bob Cousy was the coach.
What?
Really?
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. Yes, he did.
Very cool.
I
Yeah.
get to tell my sneaker story next.
That would explain why.
Ladies
Frank's
and
brother-
I'm sorry, go ahead.
It would explain why your brother only has one testicle these days. Apparently he's a harsh coach.
Oh.
Oh, so you
Okay.
got to buy the way in.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Gillmor in somewhere in California, north of somewhere.
Huh?
I introduced you so you could.
But he has
Thanks.
to do Michael first before you can do that.
I've got to do a lot of things first,
Ah,
like the
That's
whole
what she
show, and then we go to a break.
That's what
Okay,
she
so,
said.
yeah, from Seattle, Washington, or thereabouts is Michael Markman.
How do you do? How do you do? We have some great pizza in this area, by the way. A gourmet pizza shop called Pagliacci.
Yeah. You have salmon on your pizza?
Yeah.
I don't think they have a salmon pizza, but they have some pretty exotic stuff. There's potato pizza, and there's pear pizza, and lots of they do a lot of sourcing from local farms, so there's lots of exotic monthly specials.
Hmm,
Okay,
I'll
well,
be here for dinner.
I'm hungry.
so anybody want to start with streaming viewing last night on television?
Yeah, 1 o'clock in the morning for me.
Ooh.
Yeah, what'd you think, Frank?
Well, my first impression was probably not going to change any minds, but a really good job, I thought, at sort of doing the opening argument. If you looked at it as a legal proceeding, I think they set things up. There were a few interesting moments, I thought, but overall, I thought it was a decent television show. It wasn't the dramatic television show that I thought we were going to get from the producer from ABC News, but it was good. It was organized. It flowed really well. Honestly, when we got to the first intermission, I like to call it the intermission, that had been set up by that incredible 12-minute piece of video. I didn't feel at all like an hour had gone by. It really felt as though, it moved so quickly that first hour that I thought, wow, that's been an hour. And it had been an hour. Clearly they aimed their weapons at Donald Trump. And I think rightfully so. They seem to have the goods. And then when I got up this morning, I did not watch Fox last night, but when I got up this morning and read Brian Stelter's column, who did watch Fox, I was not surprised by what Fox did, but it was interesting to hear that Fox Business News, Brett Baer, who's been a Trump apologist all along, actually said, well, Trump really looks bad now. So I thought that was interesting. I'm looking forward to more of this and see it as, like a small step in the first hearing and building on that in hearings to come. That's what I expect. And
Michael
there you
Markman,
go.
what do you think?
I started listening because I had a doctor's appointment yesterday afternoon. So I heard most of all of the chairman's, Thompson's speech, opening remarks, and then half of Vice Chairman Cheney's remarks in the car. And I thought it was masterfully constructed. I love the way Thompson set it up, calling back to Abraham Lincoln, who expected to lose and who pledged to give up the office even if he lost, even if that meant losing the Civil War. He just said, this is the election, I'm going. What a great tee up for everything that followed. I thought his context setting was great. And then Cheney just laid out an indictment that is, as they fill it in the next couple of hearings, is just going to be overwhelming in terms of how well this is, as Frank says, pinned on Trump. It was Trump's show from beginning to end, and as many people predicted, this is not about the day of the riot. This is about a months-long, vast conspiracy to overthrow the constitutional order of succession in the United States.
Okay.
Then, I said, getting past the first act, when they had the witness testimony, that was just heartbreaking and amazing in terms of being able to demonstrate that even as Trump was speaking, the vanguard of the Proud Boys were already gathering, getting ready to make the assault on the Capitol. It wasn't a question of Trump's audience getting out of hand. It was a military operation, and I thought they made that clear, both in terms of the strategy and in terms of the cop talking about hours of hand-to-hand combat and what she endured. Something that no police are ever trained to do. I mean, it was a military assault.
She made a comment that it was
hang on.
like
Let me do it. Let me do the thing that I'm doing, please. Keith Chair, what do you think? You're doesn't sound like you're thinking anything because I can't hear you.
That was not an accident. No. So firstly, I think Liz Cheney credentials go up. Secondly, I think it is clear there was a concerted effort to stop the election being completed. That said, I think the strongest case against Trump is probably that he's a teenager and a catalyst. I don't think they made or will be able to make any case that he planned this. Therefore, I think he'll get off scot-free. And therefore, I think it's a huge mistake to be doing it. I think it won't serve the Democrats or the Trump opponents well to be doing it. So I agree with some of the descriptions, the heartbreakiness of the witnesses, the Proud Boys, that Trump's speech was certainly full of windbaggery, suggesting marching on the Capitol. All of that's true, but there's no new killer evidence that will get him legally responsible for an uprising or a coup.
Well, to say that Trump didn't plan it, in the sense that Steve Jobs didn't engineer the iPhone, Trump has the ability to attract a vast array of scoundrels to him because they know that he will be a fertile sponsor for what they do, just as Steve Jobs was able to attract a vast array of brilliant engineers and designers because they knew he would be a great sponsor for what they do. It's clear that this is not Trump's handiwork, but everyone who planned it, everyone who had a scheme brought it to Trump, and Trump said, yes, this is what I want. And at each point, Trump was orchestrating it. Certainly,
you see, that's not proven to me.
Okay, but I am still in the middle of getting everybody's opinion. So Dennis Pombriand.
Couple of points. The first point is American Thermopylae. Look up the Battle of Thermopylae. It was largely a lot of pushing and shoving along a very narrow road. Second, hoist by their own petard. It's interesting that Liz Cheney has so far done so much of the prosecutorial work, and the testimony that we've seen has largely been from Republicans, whether it was Jared and Ivanka or Bill Barr saying this is just bullshit, or Mark Meadows saying there's no there. These are all Republican voices, and what it appears the committee is doing is they're isolating Trump from the rest of the Republican world, even to the point where I think Liz Cheney's last words last night were to the effect that Donald Trump will be gone at some point, but the stain on your honor won't be. That's very powerful. Now there are a lot of other hearings to be had, and we got to watch and see how it goes. The only other thing I'd say to everybody is that we are still a democracy, and democracies function on 50% plus one. It's a fallacy to think we have to somehow miraculously convert the unconvertible to this way of thinking. What we need is a clear majority that says no more of this.
Yeah, unless you're the Senate.
Okay, Brent Leary.
I have to admit, I was kind of flipping back and forth,
Between
I was
what
watching-
and what?
watching some old episodes of Law and Order, trying to compare what we were seeing. Anyway, it was
We're gonna do the sound.
yeah,
Thank
there
you.
it is. It sounded like you were blowing your nose there, Frank, but
CSI DC.
there it is. I thought it was as well done as you probably do it for this opening. I wasn't looking for, leading up to this, like I guess the last week or so. It doesn't help when people say this is going to change history, because it just blows, people's expectations way too far. It's like, you get to the point where you're expecting some kind of Perry Mason moment. For all of you young folks, that was a TV show.
I was thinking the same thing there. What? Who?
See, there's a new Perry Mason that's really good.
Yes.
Wow. Okay, I haven't seen him yet, but I thought they did a good job. There's no way people that are hardcore Trump dudes, they're far gone. He could actually, as he quite himself said, he could literally go out on whatever avenue it was in New York City, shoot somebody, and they would still say MAGA. So those folks, you're not playing to those folks. I think you're playing to, there are more people who are still kind of are open to actual facts. And even if they may lean one way, maybe, going through this exercise peels off enough of those folks that we don't have to deal with that dude again, because he's going to run again. It's just a matter of if there's enough people that peel away from him that he won't win. But because he's got this hardcore set of people who, for whatever reason, they just do anything he says, and he doesn't really care about them. He only cares about them to get their vote, or if they do what he says. Once they step off that, then they're on their own. He cuts them. I mean, what did he do? He cut Mo Brooks, and this dude is still clamoring for his getting back his, getting in his good graces. So this isn't for those kind of people. This is for, people who still have a little bit of openness to be able to be swayed by facts. And I thought they did a good job with that last night.
Tina,
Yes. Oh,
have you been tuned in here?
There she is.
Okay, so what's your opinion?
I think it was well organized, well thought out. It was a really solid presentation. I'm not really looking at it as, changing minds, changing the election. I'm really looking at it as more of just, delivering facts to the American people that we may not have known for sure. Just the fact that, and we kind of knew this, but just the fact that Trump never made a phone call or called for anyone to help when the Capitol was being attacked. To know that for sure, I thought was powerful. I thought there were many, there were a few points that were made last night that were powerful and maybe not known for sure before. I perused Twitter a little bit afterwards, later on in the evening, thinking that I was going to hear that people weren't as moved as they had hoped. And I don't know if it's just, who I listen to or whatever, but I was hearing from people who were talking to relatives and friends who were Republicans and who had watched. And I was surprised to see that a lot of people were saying that they were, changing their mind, but they were hearing it, and they were saying things like, yeah, no more Trump or no more Republicans. I was kind of surprised by that. Again, it's Twitter, but I was impressed. I'm looking forward to. I think this is going to build and build, and I think that it's not a court case. We shouldn't be looking at it that way. But I was pretty impressed and pretty moved.
Okay, so anybody who I interrupted, if you want to chime in again, go ahead.
I was going to mention when I guess was it Michael, you were talking about the Proud Boys who had headed towards the Capitol before Trump even started speaking. The thing that I found that was a very interesting point, but the other point in that part of the presentation that I thought was very interesting was that they only were confronted by 2 police officers on the way. I thought that was an interesting thing. The other thing is, it seems to me that, and this has been said by the committee, maybe just hedging a bet a little bit, that no matter what happens, a win for them is to get this all on the record. And I think that no matter what, that is an absolute must do. And I think that they're doing that. And that makes it must see.
I agree with that. I agree. On the question of minds changing, one important principle always remember is that in any group, you have a spectrum of people arrayed with different attitudes, different starting opinions, and different receptivity. So sure, the core Trump crowd is not persuadable. And sure, the anti-Trump crowd isn't finding out anything that changes their mind, only that reinforces them. But somewhere in the middle, there are bound to be people who are persuadable. A friend of mine posted on Twitter yesterday afternoon before the hearing a picture of a blank sheet of paper. And he said, I made a list of all the things people could hear that could change their mind about what happened on January 6th. And that's probably true. But in politics, persuasion is just one part of it, and it's probably the minor part of the game. Motivation is the major part. So when you have these hardcore Trump fanatics who will surely do whatever they can, either in voting or intimidating others, what's important for the people who are trying to isolate and decimate Trump is motivating the team who's opposing them. And I think that's a large part of what happens in these hearings. To Tina's point about Trump not making a phone call, I think that's going to be one of the most fascinating sessions, where we're going to go hour by hour, minute by minute, with what Trump did on the day of January 6th. We're going to hear a lot of detail about his actions and lack of actions.
The applauding while watching the TVs was I think an important note.
Yeah, maybe Pence deserves it.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing that is not contested is A, Trump did it. He was very involved. B, he covered his tracks by not explicitly ordering anything. C, they haven't been able to find any evidence contrary to that. So we all know what happened, and we all know guilty, and we all know he tried to subvert the election. So this ends up being a bit of a marketing exercise more than anything else. And as a marketing exercise, it detracts from the other potential marketing exercises Democrats could be engaged in that would be a lot more productive of votes for them. So that's how I'm seeing it. It just seems to be a misfire of the wrong thing at the wrong time, when there's so many great things at the right time they could be talking about and spending time on.
Well, but that's not the remit of this committee. When you said what you said a couple of minutes ago, though, Keith, about how, if the committee doesn't change minds, it makes the Democrats look worse, gives the Republicans ammunition. I think that's a valid and fair point to make, but I don't think that that's going to end up being anything that wouldn't have happened anyway. I don't think it's wrong. Or look, yes, they didn't tie in women's rights, and yes, they didn't tie in gun safety, but who knows where it's going to go down the road? A, and B, it again, going back to getting it on the record, I'm not sure it matters.
Yeah, and I think, to your point, Keith, you're buying into the Republican spin that this committee is a political arm of the Democratic Party. That's not how we got here. That's not why the committee was set up, and that's not its purpose. The Democratic Party does have a marketing job to do. It's not being done through this committee. Hopefully it'll be done somewhere else. But to say that this committee detracts from what the Democrats should be doing is to buy into the Republican spin. That's not what this committee is. This committee is an investigation of what happened leading up to and following the events on January 6th.
But by
that train left the station long before we had all the recent spate of gun homicides. That train left the station long before we had the leak of the Supreme Court probably overturning Roe v. Wade. Those are all things that are working on their own engines. I mean, what would you expect the committee to abandon in the midst and say, "Oh, listen, let's not go forward with this because we have to talk about gun safety and women's rights"? That doesn't make any sense. The committee was on a path. They had to follow that path.
That's a fair point, but therefore you have to judge the committee by their success against that criteria, and by that criteria, the findings are going to be less than Trump is guilty.
Well,
therefore,
that finding is for a jury after a case is presented to a jury.
Yeah, but I'm just predicting.
Okay.
And of course, let's not forget there's more hearings coming. So, let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater.
Yeah. Well, the opening statements would have suggested a case, right? They didn't. They suggested innuendo. They suggested circumstantial relationships. They're far less than having a case.
They suggest.
I don't know if I agree with that. I think you missed the simple reason that
you agree with who?
I don't agree with you, Keith. And maybe 2, 3, I don't know, 4 years ago, I wrote an article about comparing Trump and a gang leader and prosecuting him under the RICO statutes, Racketeer Influence Corrupt Organizations Act. And what I saw last night was the opening salvo of a RICO prosecution. It looks a little bit different, but stay tuned.
I think you're right about that. I mean, look, there was a case made. The case was made that Trump refused to accept that he lost the election, that evidence was presented to him by people on his own staff, on his own campaign staff, by his attorney general saying he had lost the election. He refused to accept that. He put out the call. I want somebody to prove I didn't lose the election. He got a whole bunch of kooks to come in and make court cases to make the case that he hadn't lost the election because of various kinds of chicanery in the voting machines and corruption and mail-in ballots. None of those cases stood up in court. They were all dismissed. Then he brought in another group of people who said, all right, I want to find a plan not to have the election overturned. They brought him that plan. Eastman brought him that plan. He had a plan. He had a path. Okay, what we have to do is keep Pence from certifying the election. Okay, there's a whole bunch of other folks who used Trump I think for their own purposes, the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, they latched onto the train, and Trump said yes to all of it. This is very much going to be a RICO case. Trump had a purpose, he had a goal, and he enlisted the aid of anyone who would help him reach that goal. And he okayed all their nefarious plans. That's the case that was made, and we're going to see evidence of it step by step over the next 5 hearings, and then we're going to have a big summary. So I think that Dennis's point that this is like a RICO prosecution has a lot of resonance.
But you must agree that for that to be proven, what happened on January the 6th, there needs to be a direct line between that and all the other things you just described Trump as doing, as if it was a part of a single act set out through a series of stages that he orchestrated. Anything less than that, and it's all symptoms and catalysts, but not planning and organizing.
Look, it's not a question of whether he planned or organized the invasion of the Capitol. He planned and organized corrupting the counting of electoral votes and putting in fake electors so that he would be declared the winner of an election that he lost. That's what he orchestrated. It's not a question of whether he orchestrated and developed the tactical plans for invading the Capitol. He wanted a plan that would take the election away from the man who won the election. And people presented those plans to him. He approved them, and he encouraged them, and he orchestrated them. That's very clear.
None of that, Michael, none of that is being claimed to have been illegal. The only thing that would be illegal is if he planned a coup. It was not illegal for him to suspect voter fraud.
Well, I'm going to listen to Judge Carter on that rather than you. Judge Carter was very clear in saying that there's a great probability that Trump engaged in illegal acts.
Well, if
he probably has more law background than you or I, and I think he's the one who I will until someone refutes Judge Carter. I'm going to be standing with him.
Well, since the Zoom algorithm is not handling this back and forth conversation effectively, I'm going to take over. And I know that you're all fascinated by what I think about this.
I am.
Yeah, that was. I didn't hear you say that. I didn't hear anybody say that. So what I think is. There is some hope this morning, or whatever time it is, that people other than the Republicans have some tools with which to be able to fight this. I didn't feel that way yesterday. I feel that way today. In terms of I think Mike Pence seems to have had a pretty clear vision of what he had to do. He was given a number of opportunities to get in the car with the Secret Service and leave the building, which is exactly the only thing that might have stopped the election continuing. And he didn't do that. Mm-hmm. I'm amazed. I don't know how he was so insightful.
Well, I think he knew his constitution.
This isn't a Q&A.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. And the other thing that I think was proven was, well, that was my first point, but I'll reiterate it, which is the Republicans have dominated the media for 8 years now. And last night, the committee took away control of the TV set. They gave the media about 10 minutes on a bathroom break to give their initial reactions, and then came in with actual human witnesses who described their injuries and the god-awful state that the video showed. That was a lot of heavy lifting. And the fact that the major media is not in control of what they consider to be arable is a major victory for the committee. And the last thing, the point that I would make is that there are going to be a lot of, as I think Dennis and some of you alluded to, there's going to be a lot of data about like phone records. Like, you know, when they make an assertion in an opening argument, like they did, that Trump did nothing, well, they've got to have something to back that up. And I believe they do. You know, the only thing that Trump might be able to do to counter that would be to be talking about all the secret calls that he made on WhatsApp.
Or executive privilege.
Yeah,
I thought
whatever.
I thought, yeah, one of the, and somebody made this point, I don't remember where I read it today, that in almost every instance when they said, we will show, or, you know, you will see, very much like in a courtroom, they followed it up with what it was they were going to show and what it was you were going to see, which I thought was very effective. And, you know, so, you know, I honestly, as even though I said in my opening statement that I don't think many minds were changed, I'm going to amend that a little bit. I agree with, I guess it was Michael or Steve who said, you know, there's that group in the middle that could be swayed. And I think that if the committee continues on the path that it is on, actually, I think it was you, Dennis, continues on the path that it is on, the way that it is doing it, and brings in those receipts and those phone calls and those emails and all of that evidence, I think that there will be a path towards ideas being, or people being swayed to vote against the Republicans, in favor of the Democrats. I don't know, against Donald Trump if he runs again, maybe. But I think that it's powerful stuff.
Yes.
I think you're right as theatre and marketing. And that could have spill over into voting as well, by the way. It's possible on the margin, I would say, but yes. But it's not a conclusive legal victory against a criminal. That's what it is not.
It is not. It is not a court of law. It is not an indictment. It's not expected to be a legal victory against a criminal. That's another forum. For goodness' sake, you know, it's like saying a dog is not a tiger. Right? A dog is not a tiger. This is not a legal case against Trump trying to prove his guilt. This is an examination of what happened. And I think we got a much clearer picture of what happened than we did. Remember, for a year and a half, Republicans have been working very hard to minimize what happened on January 6th. It was a tourist investigation. It was simple discussion in an open forum. It was people expressing their First Amendment rights. Suddenly, we were confronted with what we saw on January 6th as we saw it. It was a vicious attack on a process of trying to ratify the electoral count and declare the winner of the election. That's what happened. That's what we saw. And just being able to remind us of that is a purpose worth accomplishing, beyond everything that we found about who may be culpable and not culpable. The fact that you could take that preposterous spin of a year and a half of minimizing what was going on and remind people what went on is in itself important.
Okay, Dennis, you're trying to gesticulate.
He was gesticulating
with Frank. Very briefly.
I want to say,
I want to hear what Dennis says, and then I'm going to say, and Frank, what do you think? But
go ahead,
first,
Dennis.
I'm going to hear Dennis.
Very briefly, 24 hours ago, we had the Republicans saying, "Oh, it's a tourist thing" or whatever. Today, after that hearing, we can now say it was a 7-part coup attempt, and that's a lot more that the Republicans have to find a way to put lipstick on a pig for.
Frank?
So Woodward and Bernstein have come again 50 years later, and basically said, not basically, they said Trump is worse than Nixon. And so I was thinking about that time when Sirica was in court, and that court battle was started out as, the burglar's story, and sort of morphed into bigger things. At the same time, the hearings were going on Capitol Hill. So there was a legal thing happening while there was a congressional thing happening. And the two actually met down the road and made it even bigger and harder for Nixon to survive. I may be stretching this somewhat, but it seems to me that almost any legal thing that gets aimed at Donald Trump, for example, what's happening in New York with his corporate case, could actually open up and infect what's happening on Capitol Hill if those two things were to happen simultaneously, which is something that happened during Watergate. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm just positing that would be a thing that you, Keith, would have to look at and say, oh yeah, there is this legal thing going on at the same time. There is this congressional thing going on. And I think I think those two things will meet.
Let me expand on that. We know some legal things that are going on in New York and in Georgia. There is the big legal thing that we don't know about. What is the Department of Justice doing about this? So that's a whole party that remains to be heard from. They could be doing nothing, or they could be preparing the case that Keith is looking to see, a case that proves Trump's guilt. We don't know about that. That's not visible yet.
Well, I would not place any bet on what you just said was going to happen, Frank, or Michael. I just don't buy it. What I do buy is that the case was made effectively by one of the most conservative members of the House of Representatives, a Republican, that Trump organized, as Dennis put it, a coup. That was very clear.
So,
hang on a second, and all the actions that took place on January 6th were in furtherance of stopping the continuation of the transfer of power. Now, if that's
exactly.
that was the fundamental that Cheney then followed up with her comments about, Trump will go away at some point, but the shame and the perfidy and the loss of democracy that the Republicans are promoting will stay and it'll stick. Now, the question is whether or not the real court, which is the voters, are going to do something about it. And I'm not confident.
So that's where I'm coming from. I'm working backwards from 2024 and asking myself, what are the consequences of this week for 2024? And it seems to me in a democracy, you're either tried and convicted of being a criminal, or you didn't do anything wrong that could be proved. That there's only those two possible outcomes. There's nothing in the middle that says you probably did something. That's not a crime.
But you're first of all, you're agreeing with me, and I don't think
I am.
I don't agree with your agreement with me. Please, ride some other horse, because I'm not agreeing with you. I think there was substantial. I think
I'm not.
Keith, I think that I don't want to be identified as somebody that thinks that yesterday was in any way a failure, because I don't think it was. And I think
I'm definitely not
extremely
implying-
meaningful, and I
No,
think
no.
that will have a huge
I-
impact.
Steve, Steve,
Hang on a second.
I'm perfectly
you want me to-
capable of speaking for myself without seeking to ride on your agreement.
Good. So take it back.
And that I didn't say that you.
So you're not
No,
agreeing with me.
Play back the tape. I never said it. You agreed with me.
Okay. Well, everybody has that opportunity. What
So-
I am saying to you is that this is going to have a tremendous impact. And if that turns out to be that the American people by 50.0001 reelect Trump or any Republican for that matter, that will not be a failure. That will be the beginning of the 2028 campaign, where those people who rode this horse are going to lose their seats in Congress. So I think this was a tremendous victory
right.
for the
I
Democrats.
understand. And I
Okay,
disagree. So I'm definitely not agreeing with you.
Excellent.
So what I am agreeing with you on, only one thing, is
So
that the next election is important. Okay, that's the
Hey.
only thing I'm agreeing with you on. And
You know, something else came up this week that doesn't sound like much, but fits into the broader mosaic, and it's this. We all know that Trump went back to the White House after his speech on the ellipse. It came out that he really did want to walk with the marchers up to the Capitol. Now, imagine if he had done that and they had breached the Capitol as they had. Would they have anointed him president for life?
who knows? But he didn't. And so let me finish the point I was making, because Steve interrupted because he thought I was stealing his agreement.
no, I didn't think that.
So the point I'm making is, firstly, I agree with Michael that this is not a legal trial. The implications of that for me is that it's a marketing exercise, because the only thing that is worth doing is a legal trial. Otherwise, what are you doing? And now, if it would be okay, actually, I'd even buy that it's a marketing exercise if it would work. But my belief is it will have the opposite effect of what you think. It will not lead to anybody pro-Trump becoming anti-Trump. In fact, it will lead to a hardening, and it will be a distraction for the Democrats from what they need to win hearts and minds on. They will not win any hearts or minds on this issue, none. And therefore, it's the wrong issue for them.
You're making the wrong point, though.
Well, the second thing I agree with Michael is this process has nothing to do with the Democrats alone. I agree with that. It's a process. It's happening. But should we pay attention to it as a primary narrative for what happens next? My answer is no, absolutely not. The primary narrative has to be, what do the Republicans stand for? This can be part of that for sure. But there's a lot of other things they stand for that 80% of the people disagree with them on. And those are the real issues. So I'm just making a very simple point that this is a tactical and probably a strategic misdirection that will favor the Republicans, not the Democrats.
I totally disagree. This is not about that. This is an investigation and report in the great tradition of the 9/11 investigation, of Pearl Harbor investigation, of a couple of other investigations, the Warren Commission. How about the Warren Commission? Wherein the report was used to improve how we do what we do so that we don't make the same mistakes. That's what you do in a democracy. That's what you do in a good company. You analyze your failures and make sure you don't make them again. That's what this is about. Whether it influences Republicans or Democrats or anything else, time will tell. We've got many more hearings before we ought to be asking that question, I think.
You know, if you go back to September of 2020, Barton Gellman in The Atlantic published an outline of all the ways that Trump might try and subvert the election. It proved to be a prescient document. And one of the things that it pointed out is all of the hinky things based on our Constitution, on the 12th Amendment, on the Electoral Vote Count Act, that create all of these possible paths for doing what Trump did. He tried to walk every one of those paths. So one of the outcomes of this, since this is a congressional investigation, will be a series of proposals of changes to our laws so that this kind of thing can't happen again. And by kind of thing, I don't mean a riot or an invasion of the Capitol building. I mean a coup that is built on loopholes in the way our electoral process works. It would be much simpler if we had a direct election by popular vote, but we have this crazy scheme of electors chosen by states, and state legislatures having power of how electors are chosen. All these things, the levels of certification and decertification, the slates of fake electors. I mean, those were all parts of this coup attempt. And a lot of those loopholes can be closed. And I think that's one of the outcomes of what this committee is doing.
Yeah, but
If
you're
it
not
comes
letting-
to that's a win. That's a big win. If that,
Yeah, it's the only thing that the committee can do is
If
to
it's
propose
an if.
new legislation. That's it. So
And it's
that's what
only
they're
an if.
doing, and they did a good job of it.
And one other thing about
Well, we just
the
saw-
upcoming 22 election, partially it is a question of what policies will the Democrats propose and what policies will the Republicans propose. But also in many states, in swing states and in Republican-controlled states, it's also about controlling the mechanism of elections. And that is a huge issue in the upcoming election. And I think that this set of hearings will throw a great deal of light on that, and hopefully will make it harder for the GOP to install coup-friendly secretaries of state, coup-friendly board of elections officers, and it's going to focus more attention on the way our elections are administered in this country, because it's clear that the coup attempt didn't end when Trump left office. It's going
No,
on
it's-
now.
it's ongoing.
It's going on in every state and county election and school board election.
That's
right
why
now.
I gave a shout out to Georgia, the state of Georgia. Basically, they got this on the media, and they won 2 elections, neither of which the political class thought was possible. And they may or may not have shifted the balance of power in Washington, but they sure as hell, beat the odds and give Democrats and independents, who are the only people who are really, the question isn't what Republicans minds are changed. It's what Democratic voters are going to actually go to the polls, and what independents are going to go there too.
Agree.
So Steve,
That's
what I'm thinking is, look, what Michael described is a desirable but entirely unrealistic set of outcomes. The next election later this year is going to swing probably both houses the wrong way. The chances of any positive change to electoral rules is 0 in my view. And the Democrats are setting themselves up to portray themselves as victims again, victims of malfeasance. And nobody loves a victim. Being a victim isn't a winning position.
So that's what you
You
got
have to-
from last night, was the Democrats are screwed.
Totally screwed.
The next election
Totally
is not
screwed.
just about the House and the Senate. The next election is about secretaries of state. It's about governors. It's about state legislatures in many, many states. That's the crucial part of the battle, not just who gets control of the House and Senate. It's a question of who gets to control the mechanisms of local elections.
And do you see, US wide, I don't see positive trends there.
Well, I think Steve just raised, maybe not a trend, but a harbinger. The Trump side of it lost in Georgia in the Republican primary. I mean, look at Pennsylvania. You've got a coup-friendly participant in January 6th running for governor on the Republican ticket. Is he going to win?
I hope not.
You know, that's a crucial election, because that will control who will win in 2024 for all of Pennsylvania's electoral votes. So it's all of these state level elections that will control what happens in 2024 more than the congressional election.
I agree with that. And I also think the ambition shouldn't be reduced only to that, however, but I agree with that. And I think
I wasn't trying to reduce it. I was trying to expand it.
Well, it's reducing it because it's a lower level of government. It's not federal. Federal government matters.
Well, I'm in a good position now because Keith, you're not agreeing with me. You're agreeing with Michael. So that's fine.
So to me, it's too rosy what you're saying. The truth is, it's way worse than you're saying, and therefore the bar is high to win. And being a victim of the other side is not a winning position.
Can I add a little,
Please,
maybe positivity? I don't know.
God help us.
I think being in Georgia, I think one of the positives out of that, I guess whatever that the primary a couple of weeks ago. You're right. I mean, it wasn't just that. And look, I can't stand the governor here, so it's not like I'm, in his corner at all. But Trump hated him because he didn't do what he said, and he basically he lives to try to crush anybody who doesn't go along with him. And so you had two dudes down here, Brian Kemp, governor, and Brad Raffensperger. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but he hates those dudes terribly. He was coming down here to, go a politic and do all the things he could potentially do to make sure they lost. Not only did they not lose, I mean, the governor won by like 50 points over Purdue. I mean, 50. That's pretty unbelievable. And even Raffensperger, he won by like 18. So to me, that's a real positive, because those are some serious hardcore Republicans. And they chose their, roots of being Republican over falling in line over Trump. Now, the other big test is going to be Herschel Walker versus the guy that's
Phil Warnock.
Yeah, Warnock. There's no way that Herschel should win anything except maybe a Heisman Trophy 40 years ago. He should not be winning any Senate races. I mean, he has a pretty terrible history, some personal stuff, and he doesn't seem to know what he's talking about most of the time. If he wins over Warnock, then that's a real step back, because the only thing I feel like is keeping him afloat is Trump. So, Georgia's still, I guess, a kind of a bellwether in terms of his is he able to translate his so-called popularity into actual action? Georgia, which has been a red state up until the last couple of years, totally red, and they're saying no. I mean, so it's kind of an interesting test case, and I think this trial, or whatever you call it, hearing, there might be more people outside of the state of Georgia that maybe act like the Georgia Republicans do, and this is off to a pretty decent start, and at least showing that there's some pretty strong Republicans like Liz Cheney and the Kurtzinger guy and Barr, all the people that, I have nothing really positive to say about, but I can say positively, they seem to be standing up for at least, certain principles that this country said is based on. So there's some positives there.
Yeah, I want to hear a TikTok in episode 8 or whatever it is about the people that threatened to or did resign from the cabinet. I want to know exactly.
You mean the whiners?
Yeah, all those guys. No, but I mean, there's information there that will be
Yeah.
very helpful for the 2022 campaign and definitely the 24 campaign. Because there's going to be plenty of time to basically say to voters, look, they lost control of the Senate in 22. I'm talking about the Democrats. They lost control of the House. They still have the presidency, and they still have a Department of Justice headed by a Democratic appointee, and that's going to go through 2024. So what's going to happen with people making a decision after all of that water is over the dam about whether they want to go back to a chaotic coup attempt every election, or whether they want some, policy to be put in place. That is doable. It may take another cycle of elections, as Keith was pointing out. I think I hate to.
Provided we still have elections in those states.
Yeah. Well, I don't think that there's any chance of the Electoral College being changed in any way. I think that's
I agree with
just
that.
science fiction. Okay, so then what are we
But
talking
there is
about?
still, but
You mentioned that. You
I
said
did mention
electoral
that. That is a given. But beneath the Electoral College, there's a whole set of procedures for how electoral votes are transmitted to Washington and counted. All that can be changed. None of that is in the Constitution.
I agree, but by a majority before the 22 election or after the 22 election. If the
certainly not
22
before.
election puts the Republicans back in power with control of bringing things to the agenda, the chances of any meaningful reform of those issues is a lot smaller to be
Agreed.
found. Okay, so it's not going to be at a local level that this is going to be decided. It's going to be
the big question for 2022 is who will win the election? Will inflation win the election, or will the threats to our safety, our threats to women's rights, our threats to LGBTQ rights win the election? Are people just going to vote their unhappiness over gas prices and food prices? Or are they going to take seriously some of the issues that government can control?
It's going to be inflation and prices. I mean, the consumer price index today, 8.6%.
Crazy.
The gas in California, I just drove past, $7.60 a gallon.
But what does the GOP have that will change any of that?
Well, it doesn't really matter, does it? Because everyone blames the incumbent for their life.
That's their biggest thing they have, is the power to blame.
So basically, you have to get ahead of things. You have to have a plan. And if you don't have a plan that's credible, like Truman did, you become the victim of your inactivity. And being a victim, I keep saying it, but being a victim is not an attractive look.
It's a battle of who's the bigger victim.
Yeah, but I think, there's time to fix this. I mean, all it takes is a positive narrative about the future that is not rooted in the past. It's a known thing in sport.
Well, I don't agree with you. I think that's a Republican talking point. And I don't
you never replay the last game. It's the next game is the only thing that matters.
It leaves me cold what you're saying. So
what?
what?
I'm trying to find sources of optimism.
Well, please, please don't. Why don't you
allow us to fight last year's battle or 2 years ago's battle?
I said
let me say what Steve means there, Keith, is for you to please don't.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's
I'll
what
shut up. I'll shut up.
No, you don't need to shut up.
Note,
you just need to change everything that you're saying to the exact opposite and agree with everybody else.
Yeah, I can do that. I mean,
Okay, cool.
Nah, we don't want that. I think it's.
Okay,
important
so
to
what about
make
those, what about that Apple event? We've got about 5 seconds to go.
they blew
Keith,
the
have you already
competition.
ordered an M2 machine?
I haven't actually, because it's kind of not enough of an upgrade. I've got the Studio, which is the M1, what's it called, Ultra Max or whatever.
Oh yeah, you got, okay, yeah, the Ultra.
So the new one isn't as good as the one I've got, but I already can see when it will be. If I could put in a pre-order, I would.
Yeah, when they can gang 4 M2s together, then it'll be better than what you have now. What I had a question for you, Keith, about it. A lot of the OS new features had to do with collaboration, and you talked a lot about collaboration last week. And I wonder, since you have experience in managing your company, what was your impression of the things that Apple showed in terms of new features across their various operating systems?
I think almost everything was directionally correct, firstly. For example, you can share stuff on SharePlay, which is the technology infrastructure layer that lets you share things in context, was spread to many more of their user interface facing stuff. So now in FaceTime, for example, you can all sit around documents and collaborate on them, not just see them from one person, but you can edit them together, for example. So if you compare it to Zoom, it's at least 2 generations ahead of Zoom in terms of what it can do. And Apple obviously is not thought of as an enterprise play, but that is an enterprise level capability that other people don't have. So I thought that was awesome. I think using the phone as a remote camera is going to have some hidden use cases that we don't even know about yet.
What was the thing too? Like they had the second camera, like it's looking from above.
So it's a bit like there's the Livestream has one of those cameras. It's such a high resolution camera with such a wide angle lens. In software, they can make it look as if it's multiple lenses by zooming in on and clipping an area and saying that's camera 1 and clipping another area and saying that's camera 2. So they basically take a downward facing picture of your desk and your face with the same lens, because it's wide angle. The one that's your face zooms into your face. The bit that's facing down in software zooms out so you can see the desk. And so
it not only zooms out, they have software that corrects for the parallax and the angle and straightens it out, so it looks like an overhead camera.
Yeah,
It's shooting down at an angle.
Is that totally a software fix?
100% software. It's because the lens is so good in terms of both resolution and width that they can make and by the way, they have 3 lenses. So ultimately in software, they're going to make it feel like 3 cameras.
So what you're talking about is the lens on the iPhone?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a wide angle, there's a telephoto, and then there's a medium shot, basically.
Yeah.
So that
And
wide
there's a
angle.
4th one, which is LiDAR, which is another story altogether.
Yeah. So I thought that was great. I've used the what's it called, stage something that it changes the screen. Instead of overlapping windows, the ones you're not using go on the left and the one you're focused on stays where it is. And when you want to flip to another app, you click on the left in it and then they change positions. So your screen is uncluttered, but all your stuff is there. That works quite well unless you're screen sharing. So if you're in a Zoom call and you want to share, like an Excel spreadsheet or something with the people on the call, it gets you have to turn it off right now because it gets confused. But mostly it's like a very good user interface, and it makes a single screen much more functional. Like in my life, I've often had 2 screens because I wanted something on one and something else on the other. I think you could actually easily live with one screen now and not have to worry about two screens. So that was good. Obviously, the M2, I mean, they're so far ahead of the opposition, it's not even funny. And you can see they're on a path now. It's going to keep going. The multitasking on the iPad I've played with as well. The iPad basically starts to look very, very similar to your Mac. I mean, there are differences, but it is like a really powerful laptop now with some extra functionality the laptop doesn't have, like touchscreen. And all the features in OS Ventura to do with screen are also on the iPad, the stage, whatever it's called.
Yeah, if you have the M1 or M2 iPad, it doesn't convert down to previous to M phase.
Like, look at this. I just turned on Studio Light or Portrait or Center Stage. Here's desk view. Continue. That's the same camera.
That looks, like a blurrier version of what you had before.
I didn't see your desk.
Yeah, it's not aiming very well. It's because I've got them all turned on. Maybe no, it's not. Studio Light's the nicest.
You still don't convince me, but you look like you know what you're talking.
The next show, we expect a full-blown demo, Keith, of everything working.
Yeah.
Man,
I have to buy new stuff again.
Like what?
I don't know.
You
There's
don't
nothing to buy.
Upgrade the
You just have to buy the little clamp that clamps your iPhone to the top of your
But
monitor.
that's Belkin. That's not Apple.
Okay, all right, good.
Or you
I
can
just-
get some Scotch tape and do it. I don't.
Gaffer's tape, man. You can do anything with gaffer's tape.
Okay, once around the table, last thoughts, new arguments. Anybody?
Yeah. Oh,
I got one.
I just got a text message from Republicans, from Democrats in Pennsylvania, who are putting out pictures showing that Mastriano is in the midst of the riot in Washington on 1/6. So Democrats are starting to market the hearings.
That might get him more votes. Who knows?
Frank?
I was just going to say, make sure you guys watch The Offer on Paramount Plus. Check
Yeah,
it
no
out.
spoilers, please.
Okay.
Oh, it's so good.
It's the best. And it comes from such a distance. Everything I'd read about it before, it sounded like a train wreck.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like
me
a
too.
Grade B, streaming video, the direct to streaming, never to a laptop. And
It's so good.
It's one of the best shows
Yeah.
ever.
Okay. Well,
And then as I was watching it, this is not a spoiler for anybody here, but as I was watching it last night, at the very, very end, a really good friend of mine showed up as mobster number 1 in the last scene. It was fantastic. I just started screaming when I saw this guy. And but it was, when I was watching it, it was just before the hearing. So it was around midnight. I thought, I'm not calling it.
Mobster number 1 is so much better than Mobster number 2.
Mobster number
Really?
1. What a gig. I mean, come on.
I
What
wanna
did you
be
do
as
in the as mobster number 1?
Okay, Dennis, any thoughts?
I was out driving earlier today on the highway, and I noticed how slow everybody was driving. People are really trying to conserve fuel because gas prices are so high. I don't know how you gauge LGBTQ or women's issues, but if you look at the highways and see how slowly people are driving, you realize that inflation and fuel prices has definitely got their attention.
Yeah, filling a tank here in the UK just hit 100 pounds.
Wow.
It definitely has crossed into the pain threshold.
Keith, last thoughts.
Borgen on Netflix is fantastic.
Is
Now
it-
you've made
is that
you've made our producer an enemy.
Oh.
with
is that Swedish?
She does not want. No, it's Norwegian.
Norwegian?
It's Danish set in Greenland amidst
Lord.
Chinese, American, and Russian rivalry.
All right.
And it acknowledges the Ukraine invasion in episode 1. So it's very current, and it's all about the discovery of oil in Greenland and the consequences of that. It's really good. It's really, really good.
Are there any
right.
Samoans in there, or I mean,
Lots of
it's like every other-
Eskimos. Lots of Eskimos.
Okay, there you go.
Oh, should
Or
we
you
say
can- you can-
native Greenlanders, which I think
Yeah.
is not actually a Eskimo, basically.
You can go and watch Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas if you want a Samoan hit.
And then the other thing is Elon got the fire hose from Twitter, which is not what he wanted. So they're basically saying, if you can figure it out, here's the data. I thought it was hilarious.
Yeah, well, just remember, I said it would go through by October, and I'm sticking with that.
They definitely played a good card. They've given him.
What do you ask for?
I mean, he really doesn't want to do it. That's obvious. But whether he's going to have to is another question.
Just fork
It's
over
just
the
about-
billion.
At the end of the day,
Nice guy.
all right. Let's see. I guess Tina, any last thoughts?
No,
No,
no, I'm good.
I can sit here as long as it takes.
I'm good. I don't.
I think she's got like a million. I think the problem isn't that you don't have a last thought, Tina. I think it's that you got a million thoughts.
Or none at all.
Well,
I
pick
mean,
one.
I just,
Pick one.
no, like, I'm good. I love everybody's last thoughts.
Mine was the best.
What was it?
There wasn't one.
I would like to say though, Frank, in pointing out the offer, I love the offer also. And boy, if movies were always that hard to make, or make a movie, I looking at the film business a little differently. I don't know how much of it is creative license or if all this stuff happened, but boy, I had no idea the complexity of making that film, and what a film. It's one of the best films ever made.
I had no idea that whole sequence with the Italian American Society and that and what went on in Columbus Circle had any touched that movie at all, which I was like, if that's true, and it seems to be, I was like, I loved how they brought all of that in.
I thought we were doing no spoilers here.
That's not actually a spoiler.
If you're talking about actual history, that does not qualify as a spoiler. You can just look it up.
It's pretty fun.
Although although Bonanno, he was killed there. He got a bullet in the head. So that was the truth.
Was that from Mobster #1?
Mobster #1 was actually in that crowd.
So can I
Okay,
do a last thought?
Brent, you have successfully skated, but now you're on topic. What is your last thought for this show?
Ever? I mean,
For this show, the current one.
Yeah, it was interesting. I enjoyed it.
Good.
Okay. I want to thank our producer and director, that person there, Tina Chase Gillmor. Welcome.
Welcome.
Well,
Thank you. You're welcome. Great show. I again really enjoyed it, and I have a feeling that we're going to be having more hearings. We're going to be having some more shows like this. It's going to be interesting.
yeah, we're thinking about maybe there's going to be some dislocation terms of Frank's move across London or wherever it is that he's going.
No, it's down the street.
Yeah. So I'm thinking that I think that Monday's session, which is a morning session, not prime time, will be interesting. And so perhaps we could sneak in an episode in the middle of the week before Frank has to go off the clock. So I'll be trying to negotiate with all of you guys.
I'm in Europe.
I'm going to tell you.
I'm in
up front.
Europe next week, Steve.
Yeah.
I'm in
Okay.
Germany all week.
Well, you can just, say who you agree with, and then we'll hear from them.
Look, my whole role in this show is to be wrong ahead of time so you can all laugh at me later. That's the whole
It's
point.
not now. It's not wrong.
Why later?
Talk about whining, Jesus.
Man. All right, Jared.
Okay, I want to thank Dennis Pombran. Thank you, sir.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me. Good show.
Michael Markman, thank you, sir.
Thank you all.
And
One last word for all the flack and static that Elon has been catching, some of which is self-generated. He's gotten very high marks for Starlink in Ukraine.
Well, the Starlink is evidently he's losing money on each one. That's a
Well,
good.
that may be, but it's strategically been very helpful to the Ukrainians.
Excellent.
I don't know. I can't speak to it as a business.
Thank you, Frank Radis.
Thanks a lot, Steve. And gangsters, Tina, good job. Chow mein.
Keith here, thank you, sir.
Did Mobster #1 be a gangster?
I refuse to answer that question on grounds that he might shoot me.
Thank you, Keith here.
You're very welcome. It's always a pleasure to put my foot in my mouth.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks to Brent Leary.
Yes, and the Rams.
Champion.
And I've already thanked Tina Chase Gillmor.
Yeah.
Thank me. And thanks to everybody who showed up, and especially those who didn't. Always have to keep them in mind. Bye-bye.
Adios.
Bye-bye.